Welcome back. Like I told you guys, this is a special, special day. One of my close friends and somebody I've known for many, many years, John Baker, is here. And you guys know him, you read his books. We are always referring to Celebrate Recovery all the way through the process of your coursework. And John is the founder of Celebrate Recovery, which this year is 26.
Going on his 26 years.
26 years. And John, along with his co-founder, Rick Warren, and he doesn't like me to say it, but he just changed the world. And I know God did it, and yes, he did, but I don't want John to feel like he's getting a big head either.
No.
But I think this is an important time, you guys, because as counselors, you will always be referring your clients to CR when they've got a hang-up, a substance issue, a codependency issue, to find the God in structure and sobriety and support. Now, not every counselee needs to go to CR. Not every CR person needs to go to counseling. But this is going to be how we train you guys to know when is it useful, because I've found it. I've sent so many clients to CR and they go, okay, now all the stuff you're working out within our one-on-one session, it gets amplified over there in CR. They work together like hand in glove. So, welcome, John.
Thank you. I'm glad to be here. I'm glad to be here.
So, I think history first is a good way to start. 25, 26 years. See, you and I were 11 years old
I
then?
think very much, yeah, if that. If that.
So, John did not start off feeling called at birth to start a Celebrate Recovery ministry. He started off in a different way. John, give us the history.
I needed to do some field work first.
Yeah, a little experiential OJT.
Right. Well, Celebrate Recovery, I'll get to that, but first let's kind of tell you how I've ended up there and ended up with God giving me the vision, which I will never understand why, but it's pretty exciting that he did. But I, from high school on, I've struggled with a very non-existent low self-esteem, and it was just part of me. However, I tried to cover that up by the world's largest ego. I had to be the best at everything I did, because deep down inside I didn't feel good enough for my parents, my girlfriends, my classmates, my coaches, whatever.
And unfortunately, you were very successful, which kind of kept that going, right? It worked for a while.
Definitely, it worked for quite some time. And once I got to college, I had to be the president of my fraternity, but also in my fraternity, they gave me another gift, in that they introduced me, which I struggled so bad to try to resist. They introduced me to alcohol. And from that first drink, it kind of took away that feeling I've been hiding inside of me for all those years, and I could relax.
That I'm not good enough.
Right, and all of a sudden, man, for a while, I was good enough, And I met my wife and she was president of her sorority, and I met my wife, and we had a sorority fraternity football game, and it was great. I went into the service. That part was not as great, but I went into the service. I was chosen to be a pilot, and in 90 days they taught me how to act like an officer and drink like a gentleman. So I continued on drinking through the service.
That was the culture that day.
Oh yeah, definitely. And they assigned me my squadron. I was a squadron social officer, which meant that I had to spend a lot of time in the officers club bar, and it was heavy duty. Anyway, but what was really starting to develop was which ended up to be a 19-year struggle with alcohol. And what I thought was the cure for all my problems became the problem of my life.
Now hold on, guys. Just think about 19 years. You got clients that you're seeing, maybe you're seeing in 6 months, but so many of them have been dealing for decades with this. So these are not like flash in the pan things. They're long-term problems.
No, I was a functional alcoholic. I did extremely well in business. I was vice president of marketing for 2 very large corporate companies in the grocery industry, and to the world it looked successful. Now at home, Cheryl was in a denial. She knew I drank, but she didn't know to what extent, and she didn't know that I actually was an alcoholic. And
probably her own codependency was kicking in.
Her codependency, it was a perfect storm.
Yeah.
And so she would try to fix me, and she is, just a little side note here, Cheryl and I will be married for 48 years this October.
Wow.
That's pretty exciting. That's pretty exciting. So anyway, back to my drinking days. I didn't ever try to get drunk. That was never my goal. I wanted to just be numb. I didn't want to feel. And every once in a while I'd slip up, but it was, it ended up towards the end where I was drinking at breakfast, at lunch, at dinner, but if just a few drinks every day, and just so I didn't have to really feel. Mm-hmm. And so I was emotionally unavailable for my family. And that's something I deeply, deeply regret. But
But your tolerance was increasing. It wasn't getting better. No, you were needing more and more and more.
Oh, definitely. And finally, until I was at a business trip in Salt Lake City, and I knew I could never take another drink because it really kind of stopped working. Oh. My liver started to suffer a little bit, and it really started to stop working. And so I decided at that time to, when I got back to California, to Orange County, I decided that I would then start AA, and it was a journey. But also during this time, I forgot to tell you, at age 13, I accepted Christ as my Lord and Savior. Now that wasn't an adult decision; that was a teenager decision. But I knew that, and that was always part of me. And finally, I decided to quit running from God and run towards Him. And that was a major decision. Proverbs 14:12 talks about a road that seems right but leads in death. And I was on that road. So it was time. And so I did, and it wasn't immediate. But one thing with AA, and I'm not saying anything against secular programs at all, because they help a lot of people. And they get a bad rap. Yeah. They get a bad rap because, they don't talk about Christ. Well, AA never intended to talk about Christ. That's for anybody of any religion.
Thank you. I've had to fight that same conversation.
Right, to help you not drink today. Now, where the Christ part comes in is that Christ is really the only power that can change you to really can change you, and in the presence. And the key is that you could be sober. You could be clean and sober. But as far as really being free, that only comes through Christ and His power. On my own power, I could not do it. I could stop for 6 weeks. I could stop for a little while. But I know a lot of great guys and ladies in AA that are, they'll sit around an AA group and they'll go, 10 years sobriety, and they'll say, I almost drank today. Well, that's the craziest thought I could have. Yeah. I mean, there's a lot of things I still do, and trust me, I still blow it, not with alcohol, but I still sin, and I'm going to sin till I go home. I try not to, but that's, as long as I got this flesh, I'm going to. But I knew who my higher power was, and that was Jesus Christ. But I couldn't really express that in an AA meeting. My family, they started going to church. I hadn't been to church for 5 years, and they started going to church. And Cheryl picked a large church where she wouldn't have to everybody know everything about your business, and that was Saddleback Church. And the kids would invite me to go and invite me to go and invite me to go, and I'd say, maybe next week. Well, finally that next week came, and I went to church because I was, I started getting into, I didn't have any Bibles around me, so I went to Barnes & Noble and bought one for $7.99. It was one of those artificial covers and everything, but I began to read it again, and it came back to me. So I wanted a relationship with Christ. So I went to Saddleback Church with them, and Rick Warren, who I had never met, never really actually heard of, was preaching. It was his church, Saddleback Church, and it was like he was talking to me. It was like he was talking to me, and you hear that all the time, but that's how I felt. So I started going to church I tried to get into a men's small group, and I couldn't really find any where I could share about my struggle with alcohol. At that time, small groups, and they've grown up a lot in churches, and especially at Saddleback. But when I would talk to, well, how's your day? Well, good. I've got 7 months now, and whatever, and but it was a tough day, and I'm one day at a time. And they would go, how about those Dodgers?
Yeah.
They just didn't want to get that deep.
It's just another world for them.
Right.
Yeah.
So basically, I knew that, that Jesus was the answer, and it was the answer for me. And if it worked for me, I knew it could work for others, because I was in pretty bad, after 19 years of abusing my body, it was taking a toll. And so I didn't know Rick at all. I heard him preach now for several months, as the story goes, and I was able to say, it was the only thing I can say. I've never had an experience since then, but God was, when I get home from work, God would just fill my head with what turned out to be Celebrate Recovery. So after 6 weeks. Cheryl sat at we had a Commodore 64 computer, with the floppy disk. And I'd say, this is what I got today. And so we would do that. And for 6 weeks I did that, and it ended up to being a 13-page single-space letter outlining what Celebrate Recovery is still doing 26 years later. And I'm not smart enough for that, folks. Just trust me on that. So I gave it to Rick and thinking, he's not going to look at that or read all that. And he did. And in a week I was in his office and he said, great, John, you do it. I go,
wait a minute, no. I'm the idea guy.
Yeah, no, I'm thinking, I need it for me, And so, but I did. And I'm sure glad I did do it, because it's been the joy of my life. It's my kids. I've got 2 kids, and they're not young children anymore. They have a lot of children of their own, but to see how that has impacted them, that decision, and they have supported me. My son Johnny has been on staff at Saddleback for 15 years now, which is unbelievable, and he's really run Celebrate Recovery at Saddleback. So it's not just something that happened overnight. It wasn't something, and this is why I think it was so important. I used to think that all those 19 years is wasted. And, God never wastes a hurt. And so it was something that was really, like I said, it was an education. I wouldn't recommend it to anybody, but it was an education that allowed me to have the love, the understanding of people just struggling with any kind of hurt, hang-up, or habit. See, Celebrate Recovery is not just for alcoholics. It's for people with codependency, sexual addiction. That's our fastest growing group. And so it's really for anybody who has any kind of hurt, hang-up, or habit. And, it's over 4 million people have gone through a year step study. And that's
4 million.
That's amazing.
And how many churches and groups did you tell me?
It's in 30,000 churches.
30,000 churches worldwide.
Yep. And it's in 20 languages. It's doing, it's also in the prisons. We're in 42 state prison systems. We're in federal prisons. And I love that. Matter of fact, we just we're in a partnership now with Prison Fellowship. And so Celebrate Recovery Inside is our arm of the prison ministry. And with what Prison Fellowship does and what we do, we complement each other very well. So when guys do get out, they can find a Celebrate Recovery on the outside. Prison Fellowship helps them balance a checkbook, helps them with the reentry part. And a lot of leaders are coming out of prison, and they're doing amazing things.
John, just having been there with you, I've been speaking for John's national leadership for a long time.
We got some more coming up.
Got some more coming up this year. Yep. What is it about the structure? We only got a few minutes,
Sure.
but just what is it about the structure that works? Because everybody wants to know the secret sauce.
Yep.
But you do a lot of internal feedback over why it works. What have you come
Well,
to?
first of all, you got to understand, everybody's been hurt. None of you have escaped being hurt. And I don't mind I'm not trying to get into your business here, but that's just life. And we've all sinned, we've all missed the mark. So we need to recover, or whatever you want to call it. So what we say is we recover from your hurts, hang-ups, and habits. Anybody with a hurt, hang-up, or habit. And let me just give you a real quick progression on that. First of all, we've all been hurt, and I think you'll probably agree with me on that. If not, you're in denial. So anyway.
Yeah, sorry, right, guys.
So anyway, we've all been hurt. If we don't address that hurt properly, what happens is it becomes a hang-up, and it just starts to interfere with certain things in our life. And then if
You mean like relationships
yeah,
and
yeah,
career and
but
self-help,
it's still
self-care?
not. You're still not going down. You're still not addicted, but it's certainly it's
disruptive.
Yeah, right. And but if you stop it there, you've got a head. So you've been hurt. You've had some hang-ups, but if you don't, it becomes a habit.
Now you're in trouble.
It can be sexual addiction. It can be whatever the person's
Something that's
struggling
disruptive
with.
over time that you can't stop on your own
Right.
power.
Love addiction, you name it. Food addiction. We got groups for everything. Financial, the whole thing. Workaholism. Anything to escape what really is there, so to hide that pain. It's only when the pain gets greater than the fear that you could really step out and get help.
All right, I need you to say that one again. Guys, take notes on this one. This was gold. Say that one again.
It is only when the pain, it's greater than the fear, is when you can really start to work on yourself, no matter how you do it, through a recovery, through counseling, through whatever. But that's when you could go, hey, I need help. I need help. I'm broke and I need help. I don't want to live this way anymore. And, I'm not trying to say, this is how I defined the addiction I had to alcohol. It was a sin addiction for me. The Bible clearly states that we are not to be, drunkenness is a sin.
Yeah.
And so there was a time where I was sinning, but then there was a time, and I wish I could tell you the day, but in those 19 years that I crossed that line and I became addicted. I would walk, this is a crazy story. Now I'll just tell this one real quick. I would walk into a bar in the morning and say, God, please don't let me drink today. As I'm opening the door.
Walking into the bar.
Right. And so why I was going in there, I don't know, but I said, so I would end up and have some drinks in the morning to get me through the morning. And I'd say, well, my clever mind, I'd say, well, God must really not want me to quit. Whoa, you talk about being sick. So, something about, giving up your will, and we talk about that a lot. But Celebrate Recovery, we have Christ-centered 12 steps that we work off of, but we also have the 8 Beatitudes. It's based on the 8 Beatitudes. This is a biblical program, and the 12 steps and the Christ-centered 12 steps and the 8 Beatitudes line up very, very well. And so some people, the 12 steps they don't want to touch, but they're okay if they go, hey, this is right out of the Bible.
Yeah, they need to see more chapter and verse.
Right.
To feel comfortable.
Yeah. So, you got anything?
I do. Guys, as counselors, one way to look at how to use CR, because it's everywhere, you can find somebody in driving distance, your client can, is going to be either when the work is stuck and they need sort of more of what you have, or when you want to accelerate things, or when that person doesn't have community. Remember he said, I told my friends I'm struggling, they say, how about the Dodgers? A lot of Christian clients and non-Christian clients have those that's just, it's their neighbor. They just don't have anybody to talk to at that level. So if you need the community around them that's reinforcing, it can use the language of process, of hurt, it's okay to be broken, repentance, all that, you send them to that. And I have done it so many times, and I've watched it accelerate what happens. So, John, can't thank you enough for what you provide.
This is going too fast, but I love it, and I hope that's helped you and given you some ideas. And go to celebraterecovery.com. That's our web page. There has a group finder. Put in your
right.
you put in your zip code, and it'll show Celebrate Recoveries that are in that area. And so that's one way. We have an app. It's a free app, Celebrate Recovery. It's got all the information you'll need. You can put it on your phone, and when somebody is traveling, they can find a meeting anywhere they want, anywhere they're going.
I spoke at the one in Tokyo one time.
Yeah, that's pretty exciting.
You can get anywhere with that thing.
Yeah.
All right, guys, get your questions ready now. John and I are going to go to the other part of the studio so we can see your smiling faces and answer questions. So we'll be right back.